think a garden is pretty much like the pinnacle of creativity because you are not only literally creating food, create a whole structure, a whole program that didn't exist at our school before. The garden project here at St. Edward High School, it not only fulfills the aims of a CAS project really well, but it's also been a way for our design tech students to have a really meaningful and interesting IA. It's also really hit a lot of the benchmarks that we're looking for in terms of interdisciplinary projects, from the beginning of drawing up the plans to nailing together the lumber and the sheet metal to make the beds, starting seeds in the biology lab. They were creating a new product entirely, something that our school hadn't had before. It's also a really active project, so there was a lot of physical activity going into building the beds, assembling the compost tumbler, shoveling the dirt, transplanting, weeding. It's always a very physical experience when they're out here working in the garden.
Instead of learning it from a textbook, you're actually going out and solving these problems.
In terms of service, the garden really addresses that strand as well, because all the food that we grew this year, and it was about 500 pounds of food, was donated to people in need in our community.
You know that in the end, they're going to actually impact people in a way. Like, our garden's going to provide fresh fruits and vegetables for the school and possibly even surrounding communities. So I just think it's better than just sitting around learning, like staring at the pages of the textbook.
They are out here collaborating with each other, communicating with each other, taking risks in the garden. They are here to learn, to try something new, to challenge themselves, and see what happens when we run up against problems.
It really fit within the spectrum of IB Design Technology in the sense that we really want students to go through from an original problem to a final solution and go through these different stages.
So, for example, we had a really hot summer, and one of the problems we had was that our cooler weather crops were suffering. They had to devise a way to put shade over our beets and our carrots so that they could thrive at the end of summer.
And so the garden itself really lent to a group IA, is the way I looked at it, where the students had to research the initial problem. Who were we working with, to coming up with initial designs, and then meeting with the garden club and meeting with Lisa to get feedback and iterate.
Our compost bin got too full, so we have somebody working on figuring out how to build a bigger space for the compost area.
What materials would be best for it, and why would those materials work? And it has to live outside, so how do we provide for the longevity of the project and the garden itself?
So there's always, in a garden, it's a living environment, and it's a dynamic classroom, and it's always full of challenges and problems that need solved, and the kids come together to talk it over, do some research, and it just provides endless opportunities for them to problem solve in a really creative way. The garden is like the pinnacle of an interdisciplinary experience. The kids in the engineering classes are the ones who were primarily in charge of the design and the build. And then we've had our biology classes participate in the garden by running experiments with different kind of soil and comparing how that grows with compared to the plants that we grew in our nutrient-rich soil.
We spent about a month and a half outside and in the environment actually creating, which then allowed the garden club to have their first plant in the fall of garlic, which led into the whole process of where Lisa's been able to transform this into this beautiful space. And so now that class, before they graduated in the spring, got to see their final product being utilized.
We kind of worked with our whole class of 20 or so guys. We kind of took it from the design stage, which we worked on for like 6 or 7 months, into the building stage, and it was really cool to kind of see us work on all of our ideas together and then finally put them into real life, into something that can be used. So it's definitely cool to kind of contribute to St. Ed's in such a specific and meaningful way.
And those are the things that we can take, and as we expand our horizon and we look to expand this entire program, we can take and develop for future use. Do we want to modify the layout? Do we want to modify the actual beds? Are there different vegetables and plants that we want to go into, and what do those need? And we can start the problem all over and the process all over with a whole new group of students that will have a very similar experience, but a very different one in the sense that we have something and we know it works, but how do we continue to innovate and continue to develop further?
And then we had an English class come out and write pastoral poems while they were in the garden and surrounded by the plants and surrounded by the inspiration for their work.
So what vegetation are you going to write your poem on, Michael?
I think I'm going to write it on the little tomatoes.
Oh, awesome. And having tasted a fresh cherry tomato from an organic garden, like what comes to mind? Like what new things are you noticing?
It was probably one of the best cherry tomatoes I've ever had. And I literally had cherry tomatoes last night in a salad. These are way higher quality, I can tell you that.
All right, so you did have a new experience. So, all right, we're looking forward to the poem you write on our cherry tomato farm.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Michael.
In the future, we are going to hopefully expand our production and involve the entrepreneurship classes as well in doing some pop-up market gardens here at the school and give kids first-hand experience with how to research what the market is for certain vegetables, what crops would sell well, how much to sell them for, how much to reinvest in the garden, and then it'll have a social entrepreneurship aspect to it, so they'll be able to research and choose a nonprofit that would be the recipient of whatever profit we make off of selling our food at the farmers market. We also hope to expand with adding chickens to our agricultural experience here at St. Edward High School. Students are actually already starting on the construction of a coop.
Right now I have students that are working on the chicken coop continuation project, and so now we're looking at how do we manage living things on campus? How do we make the environment for the community one where they feel welcome to come and see the chicken?
And that will of course add another layer of skills and knowledge to their experience out here in the garden.
The thing I most learned about myself is that I'm a pretty creative person. A lot of us think that maybe we aren't as creative as we really are, but once we get down to it and really focus, I think we can all be creative, and that's a pretty big life skill to have, especially when trying to think outside of the box and think of options that may not be the most obvious to us, because that's when we kind of create the coolest inventions and products that can be used in life.